One thing I forgot to mention, because I don't do it anymore, is stitching. And the reason I don't do stitching in ZBrush anymore is because I usually end up doing it in Painter, where I can just add the stitching in the texture, and then if I need to change the height or the color or anything like that, I don't have to rely on going back and redoing my sculpt and then rebaking it out, and also having to rely on a material ID getting a clean bake to get all those little tiny stitches. But anyway, if you do want to add stitches in ZBrush, it's pretty simple. We're going to go out of edit mode, hit Control N. I'm going to grab, again, doesn't matter which primitive, so I'm just going to grab primitive, go into edit mode, make polymesh 3D. I'm going to go all the way down here to initialize. I'm just going to hit Q cube, and now I'm going to hit X to go toggle on our X symmetry across the X axis here. And I'm going to hover over a face with my ZModeler brush, Q mesh, and we're going to do polygroup all. And because there's two polygroups on both sides that are the same, if I start Q meshing and then hold down Shift, it's going to pull those apart. Just pull those faces along the surface normal. Then I'm going to mask right down the middle, and then Control Tap to invert that mask. Hit W to go into transpose. Tap and hold down Shift and drag it straight up, and then just grab this middle one and hold down Shift, and that'll just constrain it up. And for all intents and purposes, that's a stitch. If I Control drag to unmask and then I hit D to toggle on my dynamic subdiv preview, you can see that that's pretty much a stitch. Now you can go as crazy as you want with the complexity or amount of stitching modeling you're going to do. I think that's going to work for me. I'm going to go ahead and mask this one end here, invert that mask by Control clicking, and then just rotate these around a little bit and mask these ones here. You can also do it in your ZModeler brush. If you hover over a point, you can do move by infinite depth, and then it'll move that point and then any points that are behind it as well. So you can kind of move around in that mode. If you don't need some of these lines, like I don't need this line down the middle, I'm going to hover over this edge. I'm going to do insert, single edge loop, and instead of just clicking, because that's going to insert an edge loop, I'm going to hold down Alt and tap, and that'll delete that edge loop there. I'll go ahead and keep that one. And I think we've got a good enough stitch to kind of start with. If you want to give it a little bit more bend, let's go ahead and take this line here, and instead of insert, I'm going to do bevel edge loop complete, and I'm just going to bevel that edge down, and I'm going to Control drag those, Control tap to invert, W, and then just move those up. And then I'll rotate these around a little bit more. There we go, a little bit more of an arch. So there's our first stitch. So what I can do is I can go to hit B, create insert mesh, new. Now we have a stitch brush. If I want to make a double stitch brush, all I got to do is hit W, drag, Control Shift, and just pull out a copy of that, Control drag, and I'm going to go B, create insert mesh, and I'm going to append this to the insert mesh I just made, hit OK. And now if I hit the M key with that brush selected, I've got my single and my double stitch to choose from. Now if I use it as is right now, it's just going to drag out an insert mesh brush of those insert mesh brushes we just made. But what I can do is if I go to, first I'm going to hit Shift D to go out of that dynamic preview mode here. And then I'm going to take my stroke menu and I'm going to put it right over here on the side. I'm going to go to my curve menus right here. I'm just going to hold down Shift and open all those up. And the first thing I need to do is turn on curve mode. So with curve mode turned on, I can drag that out and it'll give me little patterns. Of course, when you make your brush size bigger or smaller, and we've gone over this before in previous videos, you can make your curve bigger or smaller if you want to. If you also go to your curve step, which is right underneath curve mode, so if you change this curve step to say 0.5 and then tap to update, it'll go ahead and it'll start shrinking the distance between those stitches. So if we do like 1.5 and then tap, it'll go ahead and start putting space between them. So there you go. And of course, if we hit M and then go into the single brush and then drag out a copy for that, you're going to see that our curve step is set back to 1. So it's going to maintain those for each individual insert mesh. I'm going to go ahead and make that 1.5 as well. There we go. All right, that stitch brush is looking good. So if I tap off now and then I do a quick, well, for you it'll be under subtool, say since it auto masks when we start drawing this on, I'm going to go to split and then unmasked. Let's do split masked points, and that way we can keep this subtool selected. And now if I hit D to do my dynamic preview, you're going to see there's some stitches. So with our new brush, let's go over here to the boot. I'm going to hit F to frame it. And if you want to, you can just Alt-tap any of these to go ahead and start drawing on them. Now, a caveat, if you start drawing on something that has subdivision history, so I'm going to go B, grab our insert mesh brush that we made, that is our stitch brush now, and I hit M, grab the single one, and I start drawing on here, it's going to go, hey, you can't draw on this because it has multiple subdivision levels. So you got to delete or freeze subdivision levels and try it again. One thing I like to do is one thing you can do is you can delete lower, and then you can draw all the stitches that you want, and then when you're done, you can tap off to get rid of that curve, and that is also under the stroke curve functions. You hit that delete button to delete any curves, and then you can do a split on mask points, etc., etc. Or what you can do, I'm going to go ahead and do a hide point, which for you is going to be under visibility, hide point, and then I'm going to do delete hidden. One thing you can do, well, once you've done that, you're going to want to reconstruct your subdivision history back so you get to your lower subdivision levels. But you can also just take this one and duplicate it off, and then you can delete lower on this one, and now you can kind of work on a duplicate. Or you can select another object that doesn't have subdivision history on here, or you can append an object that doesn't have subdivision, hide it somewhere in your scene, and you can just use that. Anyway, if we want to draw stitches on this now, I can just very carefully go around and draw stitches like so. And then again, like I said, let's go into solo mode here. If you want to make your stitches bigger, you can just make your brush size bigger, and then this blue line in here is so you can go and reposition these. Because we have snap turned on and bend turned on, the curve is going to bend and it's going to snap to the underlying surface. If I want to continue this, all I got to do is see that little red rubber band sticking out. If I start from there and continue dragging, it'll continue those stitches. Same from this direction. So basic insert curve mesh brush functionality. If I want to go ahead and put this on its own thing, I'm going to go split mask points, go out of solo mode, and now if I hit D to do my dynamic preview, you're going to see that's what my stitches look like. If you want them to embed a little bit, let's go ahead and delete that subtool. And we'll go back to this one with no subdivision history. Oops, there we go. What you can do is, as I'm drawing these on here, let's make our brush size really big. You can kind of see maybe you want it to embed a little bit more. Go down here to your brush depth and just drag this down just a little bit there. And now when you drag, it's going to embed those a little bit more. If you want to make them flatter, you can change your Z intensity down. So now it'll be lay a little bit flatter. If you want to over crank it, you can crank your Z intensity up to 100, and then under brush modifiers, you can change your strength multiplier to like 2, and now they'll be very, very intensely taller. So, but then you just got to go and re-click on your brush there. So that's one way to do it. Now, I tend to like to frame a border for my meshes so that it gets me a nice, clean, and quicker result. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and tap off, and then I'll do a hide point, visibility hide point for you, and then delete hidden, geometry modify topology, delete hidden. I'm going to take this base boot here, and do we have polygroups? No. Let's go ahead and I'm going to temporarily reconstruct here, and I'm going to go to my polygroup menu, and I'm just going to do a group by normals with a max angle of 45, and that'll go ahead and give me a polygroup on this front face here, which is what I want. And now if I go up subdivision levels here, you're going to see I have a front polygroup. Now what I can do is hold down Control Shift, and now I can frame this border with a curve, and then I can apply anything to this curve. It can be rivets, it can be a chain link, it can be anything. In this case, it's going to be stitches. Now, if I put stitches right along this border, it's going to be kind of on the outer edge, and I want it to be in further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this down to, like, say, subdivision level 5. Go into solo mode. Delete higher, delete lower, because again, I'm just using this as a temporary placeholder. Hold down Control Shift, isolate that green part there, and then I can go to visibility, and you're going to see there's grow and there's shrink. That's Control Shift X and Control Shift S. I'm going to do Control Shift S and kind of bring these loops in just a bit, and then really quickly I'm going to go to masking. I'm just going to mask by border. I'm going to Control Tap to invert that mask. Deformation, I'm going to do a polish by features, or just a polish just to kind of round those edges out so it's a nice smooth edge. Control drag, and I'll just go ahead and do a delete hidden. Now what I can do is go over here to my stroke menu, and under frame mesh, I'm just going to do frame mesh border here, and then I'm going to select my insert mesh brush here, make sure I have my single stroke, tap that one, and now I have framed this entire thing with stitches. So if I tap away from my stitches, they'll show up. If I want to make them a little bit bigger, undo that, and then retap, make them a little bit bigger, then tap off. I'm going to do a quick, let's go split masked points here. And now if I go, I don't need this anymore. This is just placeholder. Let's go ahead and delete that. Go out of solo mode. And now I've got stitches running along the inside edge. I can Alt tap these stitches here and hit D to do my dynamic preview. And there you go. Now we've got stitches running all the way around. Of course, what you can do is go in here and just modify this with your move brush. You can go and push and pull these things around. You can turn on transparency with ghost if you want to kind of give it a little divot to live in. So you can do all sorts of cool stuff just to kind of get some stitches going and add a little bit more detail to your model.